Good evening, everybody.
Yes, sir. Can I start?
Yes, Girish is an oncosurgeon. He is trained from Tata Institute, Mumbai. And after his MCH, he was assistant professor at Ramaya Medical College. After a few years, then he joined Aster CMI Hospital. He is a very meticulous and very academically oriented oncosurgeon. Welcome, Dr. Girish. And
Today I'll be speaking about cancer prevention and screening. Of all the known things which can cause cancer, before I talk about the prevention part, I thought we should talk about the etiology of the cancer. Specific etiologies are not known, though very few things are directly associated with cancer. Of those few important things we have mentioned here, we would be starting with tobacco. It's one of the most important thing because it's a preventable cause for malignancy. Worldwide, about 50% of people smoke, including 41% of men and about 5% of women smoke. This has been shown to directly related to malignancy, and it's a class 1 carcinogen. Smokers can be classified according to the time frame of smoking, whether they could be a current smoker, recent smoker, former smoker, or never smoker. Current being presently within a week's time he's been smoking, recent who has stopped between 1 week to 1 year. Former is one who has stopped about more than 1 year and never, probably he has smoked less than 100 cigarettes in the last 10-year period. The quantity of smoke can be attributed or is objectively assessed by the number of pack years. It's the number of the pack smoked for number of years. So that would give the approximate total tobacco exposure. Tobacco could be both smokeless and smoke form, the commonest one being the smoke form. Probably the earlier times in India, smokeless ones were used more frequently in compared to smoke ones as presently. There are about 72 carcinogens known in the tobacco, the recorded ones, of which the ones related to N-nitrosamines are the most commonest ones. There are also benzene compounds, butadiene compounds, aromatic amines, and the heavy metal cadmium. These are the known 6 major ones which can lead to malignancy. Of these nitrosamines, NNK and N and NNK are the most important nitrosamines which are important carcinogens in the tobacco. So you should note here that nicotine is not a carcinogen, it is just the addictive component of tobacco which binds the person or which takes the person for this addiction of tobacco usage. How does it act? Usually it causes DNA adducts and suppresses P53 function and KRAS mutations. So this leads to mutagenic effects of tobacco. General public awareness by pictorial things or by videos played in public cinemas or on the tobacco, like cigarette packets have been helpful in preventing the tobacco usage probably in the Western countries compared to the industrializing countries like India. Even with all these things, the percentage of smoking in India has been on a gradual high. People are not deterred with the rate increase nor the depiction of ghastly figures on the tobacco packets when the cigarette packets, nor the ones videos shown in the cinema halls has deterred usage of tobacco. Conversely, in case of westernized countries like the USA and the, Europe, it has shown significant reduction in the usage of both smoke ones and the non-smoke and smokeless forms of tobacco usage. The usage of these low tarred ones and filtered cigarettes actually has caused a false effect on the usage of cigarette. People feel that they have been protected by the carcinogenic effects of the tobacco, and they actually use more ones. The flavored ones are being used more. The effect or the reward they get with each puff, when they use filtered cigarettes, they need to take deeper breaths. So the effect of smoke is actually delivered more, and the delivery of the carcinogens is more as compared to the person who has been using non-filtered cigarettes. So it has been actually a deterrent of using filtered cigarettes. Tar as such does not cause any malignancy. It just is the particulate matter which settles within the lung, may cause restrictive disease later. As a person who has been involved in treatment of malignancies or who has been in association with the person who has reached you for help, with respect to malignancies and who has been known to a smoker, you need to ask for whether he's been using tobacco in whatever form. If it is yes, you need to advise against that, assess the quantity or for how long he has been used it. And then if the person is showing that interest that he has to quit tobacco smoking, then you need to assist him with various non-pharmacological and pharmacological methods. Then further, when the patient or the person has got off the tobacco, got off the addiction, then you need to probably arrange frequent free visits or reinforcement visits to see that he'll continue to be off tobacco. The ones I mentioned about assistance is by nicotine replacement therapy. Nicotine gives this dopaminergic high immediately within seconds of each puff of cigarette being taken. It reaches the mesolimbic system and it gives a stimulant. It is a stimulant of dopaminergic system over there, and probably that gives a high to the patient or the person who's been smoking, and that leads to repeated craving or the addiction of the person towards this tobacco. Nicotine, the types of the compounds of nicotine or the quantity of the nicotine in the tobacco varies along with the places where it is grown, how it is cured, and what type of aeration or the microbial effect has been used to bring up this quantity of nicotine in the tobacco. So it is, as earlier told, it is not associated with increased risk of cancer. It is just an addictive substance, and the nicotine replacement therapy can be used since it is a known thing that it is a dopaminergic reward system. Nicotine replacement therapy, either by patches or by gums, can be used to stop this craving. Other pharmacological drugs like bupropion and varenicline are the ones approved to use along with the nicotine as dual nicotine replacement therapy to come out of this tobacco addiction. The person taking care either by physician or at home or any friends or whoever is associated with the person probably has to be in such mindset that they give repeated reinforcement of benefits of cessation. If anyone wants to ask anything about tobacco, I would like to take questions here.
Yeah, Dr. Nooli, sir.
Sir, what is that DNA edit something was shown? I didn't understand.
When they use this tobacco, sir, whatever carcinogens are mentioned over there, they form base pairs but different purines and pyrimidines. They form at different, not at the ATGC ones. They form different base pairs, which usually don't sustain, and they result in mutations or probably irreversible change in the DNA. That would be called as DNA edits.
DNA of the normal cell, sir?
Yes, normal cells, sir.
Oh, okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Anybody else? Girish, what is e-cigarettes or vaping?
Yes, sir. It's a new phenomenon. Probably around 30 years this has been used. Nicotine or other vaporized components are used by a heating element. Heating element is within the cigarette-like thing, and this is usually based on some battery-based device or electronically connected device. These vapors are deeply inhaled, and apart from nicotine, they also contain many other benzene compounds which reach the whatever the bloodstream within few minutes of inhalation. They are known to prevent the patient or the person from getting into this tobacco again. But conversely, the person who is also addicted to this cigarette or the vaporization of these chemicals, actually have known to come back to this tobacco at a later date if they don't give up this vaping also. So vaping in a way is discouraged. So just by the fact that the psychological effect of the patient who wishes to smoke, even the vapors will sometime be given way, and then he turns out to be a tobacco addict at a later date. So it's once for all is to be discouraged. Though people have shown that there are few instances, or probably the percentage of instances where the person using vaping has come out totally of tobacco and also vaping, but the percentage of people who continue to vape and then go back to the tobacco smoking is more. Hence, vaping is to be discouraged. By itself, vaping has not shown any direct carcinogenic effect till now.
Right. I think it's also banned from the
Yes.
government now.
Recently, about a year back, it was banned, sir, here.
Right, right. Any other questions or shall we move on? What about other forms like snuff, khaini? All those are also equally carcinogenic or there is any difference?
They are all smokeless forms of tobacco, sir.
Correct.
No. They are all smokeless forms.
Can't hear you.
Though
Can't.
the quantity of nitrosamines will vary.
Right.
Sir, our side, this gutka consumption is too much, sir.
Am I audible?
There is some disturbances, Girish. Can you come nearer to the mic? You have already, your video is off, huh? Put off your video.
Yeah, video is off. I have never switched it on, sir.
Okay.
No, it is off, sir. I'm audible now?
Yes, better.
Just now is it better, sir?
Better. But your slides make it full size.
Yeah. I'll change it now, sir, because I had to adjust it.
Okay. Your opinion on gutka? Same thing.
All smokeless forms of tobacco have lesser quantity of nitrosamines compared to the smoked ones. In no way they are any better. They are equally to be condemned for usage because there is no less effect of carcinogens in compared to the ones which have been smoked. So they have equal quantity of benzene compounds, cadmium, all those things. So they are equally responsible, particularly in our country, to cause tobacco-related malignancies, particularly in the oral cavity and the lungs.
A chronic smoker, if he stops smoking, it totally prevents any future cancer.
No, sir. The chronicity, at least about, if a person has smoked about 5 years for about 10 years, then the carcinogenic effect, even after stoppage of smoking, will continue to be there. Probably the related cardiovascular events and the restrictive physiology happening in the lung may improve. The immediate effects of the smoking might be altered, but the carcinogenic effects will continue to be there.
Okay.
Sir,
Yes, sir.
excuse me, sir, nitrosamines, they say that the burnt part of the food, like in chicken, that
Yes.
dark thing will be there, or when we prepare a roti, that dark thing,
Yes.
because of eating that nitrosamine, how carcinogenic it is, sir?
You mean the ones which are in the dark food, is it?
Yeah, yes. The or extra burnt part.
I know, I got your point.
Yes, sir.
I really don't know about the same thing, whether it is the same nitrosamine within the tobacco, and it must be a different nitrosamine. I really don't know what is the direct percentage or how significant is that with respect to malignancy.
Okay.
Right. Continue, Girish. But the
should be, sir.
Food is more carcinogenic towards stomach, no, than other areas.
Which one, sir?
Smoked food is carcinogenic towards esophagus and stomach.
Yes, sir. It is to the esophagus.
Yes. Okay, continue.
With respect to the second most commonest known thing would be the oncogenic viruses. They are related to about 10% of all cancers as a direct causal effect. For this, there should be a long-standing infection, and they are particularly common in non-industrialized nations like ours. And they act both by direct and indirect mechanisms. The direct mechanisms, they actually directly inactivate the tumor suppressor genes, commonly P53 and the retinoblastoma genes. The indirect effect would be by inflammatory immune responses. The common known viruses which are associated with malignancies are human herpes viruses and hepatitis B, hepatitis C, Epstein-Barr viruses, and T-cell lymphoma virus. It includes, this human herpes virus includes papilloma virus also. Coming to the human papilloma virus, They are known to cause both malignancies or non-malignant lesions. The common malignancy associated with human papillomavirus is around the anogenital region, the cervix, the genitalia, and the oropharynx. Recently, this oropharynx was discovered probably about 20 years back. Otherwise, the known thing was cervix commonly. There are specific strains which are associated with the anogenital herpes virus infections. The 16 and 18 ones are the ones which are commonly associated with malignancies of cervix. Other lesser known strains like 31, 33 are also associated with anogenital malignancies, including cervix and the penis. Even around the anus, it can cause malignancies. Oropharynx ones, they were peculiarly discovered when they found that patients who had no history of tobacco, but they still developed malignancies of tonsils, which led to the biopsies, and then further genetic studies showed that they specifically had this P53 mutation or suppression. Further on in evaluation, they found that these were specifically caused by papillomavirus infection over there. So they are inversely related to tobacco usage, unlike other oral cavity malignancies or lung malignancies. There are specific vaccines associated, which I'll be talking about later. And these vaccines are known to prevent in situ neoplasia only. We have been known that Epstein-Barr viruses is associated with Burkitt's lymphoma, lymphoproliferative disorders, and nasopharyngeal carcinomas. Hepatocellular carcinoma is associated with both HB virus, hepatitis B virus, and C virus. These viruses are directly causing these mutations within the tumor suppressor genes. They also cause bending of DNA helix by changes in the base pairs, and so that they can't repair themselves. They also induce some host inflammation, so that the host inflammation causes fibrosis leading to cirrhosis, and then cirrhosis further leads to malignancy. This should be the pathway. As I told you, the chemicals could be both genotoxic and non-genotoxic. So these are the viruses involved. The other things which may be associated with malignancies, known things would be physical factors. The commonest ones are ionizing radiations, which are both electromagnetic or particles. Electromagnetic radiations include gamma rays and X-rays. The other particular radiations include neutrons, electrons, protons, all those things. They actually lead to ionizing effects on the DNA. They cause double-strand DNA breaks, so that the DNA repair, this thing is lost. The indirect action is by release of reactive oxygen species, including hydroxyl ion. They all lead to double-stranded DNA breaks. The other known factors which may lead to malignancies, the etiological factors would be dietary factors, which includes alcohol, which is also classified as a class 1 carcinogen, excessive dietary fat, excessive energy in the forms of calories. I would like to stop here before I go to obesity and physical activity. If anyone wants to point out something.
Yes, Girish, I think there are some questions. Dr. Noni, sir?
Dr. Girish, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now we are talking more about COVID-19.
Yes, yes.
It is affecting more these cancer patients also. What is your take on that?
There is no specific relation with respect to cancer and the COVID, sir. Probably the challenged status, either because of less host immune response, may cause more known varieties of effects of COVID. Otherwise, there is no specific relation found with respect to malignancy and COVID. Patient who has undergone chemo or who is on chemo definitely will have a lower threshold of this getting these infections, and probably a person who is getting bleomycin in case of CS testis, all those things, they definitely will have a chance of having complications with respect to lung in compared to other normal person. Otherwise, no specific relation as such.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I think too early to say about this, sir, now. You are not yet understood totally about COVID
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Few papers have come, sir, already, but
already, no? Right.
yeah, already papers are out.
Dr. Lakshman, your
Yeah,
comment?
Girish rightly mentioned about Epstein-Barr virus and papilloma virus and all that, but would you include Hep B and Hep B viruses going on to hepatocellular carcinoma later also under the carcinogenic group?
Yes, sir.
Adenovirus or chitis, for example, later on has also been described to give rise to malignancy in the testis.
Chitis is it, sir?
Sorry, or pre-existing orchitis
Orchitis, okay.
is a risk
Inflammation, I come
factor.
to that, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, inflammation is known to be having a carcinogenic. Chronic inflammation is definitely known to have some stimulatory effect for these things.
Yeah. Okay.
Adenovirus. Right. Dr. Mahesh, I think that is answered. Dr. Madan, go on.
So my question was, the smoke that is created during electrocautery surgery is a carcinogenic. Sir?
There are definitely papers to show that it has carcinogenic effect. In comparison to cigarette smoke, they have compared, and there are reports to show that cautery smoke is carcinogenic.
Okay, sir.
Right. Any other questions? All right. Girish,
Sir,
see, this CA cervix, all those things, we say this is one of the reasons, but do we really check whether there is any virus or anything when you do these surgeries and all?
you mean on histopathology, is it? Or before histopathology, before when we do biopsy, do we check for these things? Are you asking? Is it? No,
Yes.
sir. We don't check at that time.
There is no need to check or anything?
No requirement of checking for that. It has happened already. We don't try to see. It's a proven thing. We don't try to see or correlate or prove there that this is the reason. No, we don't do that.
Oh, okay. Right. Carry on.
Obesity and physical activity are one of the known things it's an epidemic actually, which has been shown to be associated with malignancy. But 1/5 of population all over the world is obese, and 20% of new cases and 17% of cancer deaths are associated with obesity. And inactivity also, about half of the percentages mentioned is associated with malignancy. Obesity is defined as body mass index more than or equal to 30 kgs per meter square. Obesity is directly associated as a causal reason for malignancies of endometrium, esophagus, adenocarcinoma, hepatocellular carcinoma, renal carcinoma, and multiple myeloma. The ones caused by smoking are usually not seen associated with some obesity. Obesity usually leads to esophageal adenocarcinomas involving the lower esophagus and the gastroesophageal junction. At the same time, smoking is usually associated with carcinomas, squamous cell carcinomas of the middle and the proximal third of esophagus. And in the similar manner, it is also seen in lung also. Non-smokers tend to have adenocarcinomas in the periphery, and the smokers tend to have central lesions, which are usually squamous cell carcinomas. Apart from that, obesity patients have known to have increased complications, and there are good amount of publications in bariatric surgery showing that the complication rates associated with malignancy in previously patients who were treated for malignancies who are obese to reduce the recurrence rates and the complications of malignancies, and the reduction in the occurrence of the malignancies as such who was undergone bariatric is proven. Apart from these bariatric surgery papers, probably there is no other direct obvious evidence that obesity has been shown to, improvement in patients who have got obesity by reduction in the weight or any other. Physical activity is associated with malignancies of colon, breast, and endometrial cancers. And they are also directly about 20% of people who have got this sedentary behavior are known to have increased risk. As sir already mentioned, it is the regulation of adiposity, usually the inflammation, low grade chronic inflammation, which leads to a setup wherein it adds up to the local chemical factors or the growth factors which promote malignancy. Apart from that, the persistent elevated level of insulin-like growth factors, leptin, sex steroids, and reduced immunity, which happens in these patients having both obesity and reduced physical activity, are known to lead to malignancies. Anyone would like to ask something about this physical activity and obesity?
Yes, I think you have mentioned most of the things. Dr. Mahesh, you had some.
Can a thin, inactive individual
Yes.
be prone for malignancy?
In what way, sir? With specific to this
No, you
weight
said
you are asking?
inactivity contributes malignancy.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so
Sedentary
if
lifestyle itself, regardless of the weight, regardless of
okay,
the optimum BMI can develop malignancy.
okay,
To increase the relative risk by about 20%.
okay.
Yeah, obesity is a chronic inflammatory state that itself can contribute for many of the malignancies. Right. Any other questions? And there are so many other changes. Right. Continue, Girish.
Coming to role of surgery in cancer prevention, very specific mutations are known to happen in few malignancies, and when these things are known in a patient, then probably there is a role for surgery as a preventive role. These are the malignancies seen in breast, stomach, ovary, endometrium, and colorectal. Coming to specifically to breast, there are risk models associated or used for these patients who are presenting with breast malignancies. When the risk models are used and the patients are known to have more than 20% of risk, or when there is a mutation, known genetic mutation, germline mutation, or a somatic mutation, or when there is a strong family history, then probably you need to look for this surveillance, chemoprevention, or surgery as a preventive role in patients of or in persons who have these risks which I mentioned just now. Also, patients who have undergone mantle radiation for lymphomas in about 20 to 30 years gap earlier for lymphomas involving the mediastinum, or the patients who was known to be having lobular carcinoma in situ on biopsies. How do we follow these patients? We have to know that these patients are having presently no evidence of malignancy. Then we can follow them up, or the surveillance can be done with MRI and mammography. When do you start them? You start them at the earliest, usually at the age of around 30, when you have a proven genetic mutation. The other chemicals or the drugs used as chemopreventive drugs would be tamoxifen in premenopausal patients, raloxifene and exemestane in postmenopausal patients. The surgical ones would be risk reduction surgeries. It includes risk reduction mastectomy and risk reduction salpingo-oophorectomy. These surgeries are indicated for patients who are positive for BRCA1 and 2 genetic mutations. These are autosomally dominant mutations which happen in chromosomes 17 and 13 respectively. They are known to have increased risk of breast, ovary, pancreas malignancies. So risk reduction surgery clearly has a role in these patients who are known to have these mutations. Apart from this, there are multiple other lesser known mutations which can lead to breast malignancies, PTEN, SSK1, all those things can be considered for these type of surgeries. The risk reduction mastectomy includes total mastectomy, wherein we remove the whole of the breast as we do a simple mastectomy, or it could be a skin sparing mastectomy or nipple sparing mastectomy, which gives a potential cosmetic advantage, wherein we retain the other day or PG mentioned about the oncoplastic plane, we retain a thin layer of the skin and the subcutaneous tissue and remove all other breast tissue, and an implant can be used or a remnant the patient's body's tissue like the DAP flap can be used to reconstruct the breast. So apart from cosmetic, three would be taking care of breast and nipple tissues over there. In nipple sparing mastectomy, we retain the nipple over there. There are comparative studies with respect to nipple sparing mastectomy and total mastectomy, and they are shown to be of equal benefit without any deleterious effects of retaining the nipple only. We have to take care that the whole of the breast tissue below the nipple, including the ductal tissue, has to be totally shaven off. When do you do them? As early as possible after completion of the family. Coming to hereditary diffuse gastric cancer, there are ones which are showing mutations in CDH1 gene. Even these are autosomally dominantly inherited, and they are familial in 10% of patients. Before any intervention, all these patients, including whether it is breast, gastric, or colorectal, or any other hereditary symptoms, they have to be appropriately genetically counseled, tested, and then considered for all these risk reduction surgeries. It would encompass a prophylactic total gastrectomy, and the timing of surgery is at as early as possible. It could be in the second decade or the third decade of life, whenever you have suspicion and you have done this with respect to his family history or the presentation symptoms, then probably you have to do it at the earliest. Surveillance is probably of not good effect in case of hereditary gastric cancer. Surgical would be better intervention. At the same time, we need to know that this mutation of the CDH1 gene also affects breast tissue, and they are known to have lobular carcinoma in situ. So surveillance of the breast, either by continuing surveillance, or we can continue with mammography and MRI. Apart from that, we may consider for them for risk reduction surgery based on the risk assessment models. Coming to hereditary ovarian cancer, as mentioned earlier, BRCA1 and 2 also have impact on malignancies of ovary and the fallopian tube and the peritoneum. The common feature over here of all these three tissues is the tissue of origin. All these three tissues, ovary, fallopian tube, and the peritoneum, they are known to be arising from the coelomic epithelium, which further differentiate to these three different tissues. So they have a common tissue of origin. Usually the ones which are associated with BRCA1 and 2 are known to arise from the fimbrial side of the epithelium over there. The changes, whatever happen at around the fimbria and then go on to the ovary, than de novo arising from the ovary itself. The chances of malignancies of ovaries in BRCA2 is higher as compared to about BRCA1. BRCA2 patients, about 40% of them develop ovarian malignancies, epithelial ovarian malignancies, and about 15 to 20% of BRCA1s will develop ovarian malignancies. In the same time, I would like to mention that BRCA1 patients, about 50% of them develop breast malignancies, and BRCA2 would be about 30 to 40% to develop breast malignancies. So these ovarian malignancies, the ones which BRCA1 and 2 constitute about 15 to 20%. Whenever you find a person who has presented with a suspicion of ovarian, fallopian, or peritoneal malignancies, it is to be a general blanket statement that you have to test for BRCA1 and 2. Unlike the breast patient, where you assess the risk and you take the family history and then you decide whether to do a BRCA1 or 2. When you find that the patient has got a BRCA1 and 2 and it's a germline mutation, after completion of the family, or with discussion with the family whether it is completion of the family or not, whether to dare to continue to do that, you can offer them risk reduction surgery, which encompasses removal, prophylactic salpingo-oophorectomy. OCPs are known to have some beneficial effect. At the same time, we need to show that there is some deleterious effect of OCPs on the breast in the same sitting where BRCA1 and 2 is positive. Coming to Lynch syndrome, they are autosomally dominant inherited syndrome involving MMR genes. They cause microsatellite instability, and they are known to cause malignancies of colon, endometrium. The risk reduction surgeries for the same include prophylactic colectomy and prophylactic total abdominal hysterectomy. The other most important familial malignancies are the ones which have got specific genetic mutations is MEN type 2, medullary carcinomas and its syndromes. MEN syndrome 2A and 2B are associated with medullary carcinoma, and there is one non-MEN syndrome of medullary carcinoma called familial medullary carcinomas. These are inherited autosomal dominantly, and they are specific mutation associated with RET proto-oncogene on chromosome 10. When a person is known to have this either by the family history or by the clinical features itself known before, the intention of these tests are to be seen that the patient is actually managed before appearance of any clinical symptoms. There would be a strong family history. You know that this patient has undergone this, then you would test their siblings or his relatives, then find out that who is having these mutations, and they would be considered for prophylactic surgery. If it is a person who has got 2B, then the surgery would be indicated before first year of age itself. And the ones who have got 2A, the surgery is indicated at around 5 to 6 years of age. It has to be done before 5 to 6 years of age. The familial ones can be waited till about 10 years of age. If at all, you may ask that what if the other patients 2A and FMTC are operated before that? You can operate. Actually, that should not be a problem with earlier surgery, but the maximum limit would be such that 2A would be around 5 to 6 years, and the familial one would be around 10 years of age. For the MEN 2B, it has to be sure that it has to be done before less than 1 year of age. MEN 2B is associated with the neuromas of the tongue, and MEN 2A is commonly associated with parathyroid adenomas and pheochromocytomas. We all know these hereditary colorectal cancers. There are multiple genetic abnormalities, the commonest one being Lynch syndrome and adenomatous polyposis. Familial adenomatous polyposis again is autosomal dominant one by chromosome 5p, phenomenon of 5p, and there is attenuated variant of this. They are commonly present with multiple hundreds of polyps all over the colon. Whenever you have known that and you have suspected that, you would do a genetic testing, and the family members have to be involved in the counseling and genetic testing, and accordingly prophylactic surgeries are indicated for the other members of the family. There are non-polyp complications or the disease components like desmoid tumors, both intra-abdominal and the muscular ones. Commonly, intra-abdominal one, non-abdominal wall, intra-abdominal ones are common in FAPs. They have to be managed also along with this. Many of them don't grow, and they may be observed or surveillance can be done. When they grow and they're in considerable size, they can be considered for surgery. Lynch syndrome, I've already mentioned earlier. Even they warrant about the percentage, 100% penetrance is seen in familial adenomatous polyposis. The percentage of penetrance in Lynch syndrome is quite less compared to familial adenomatous polyposis. About 55% of them develop colon malignancies. They may be considered for surveillance by colonoscopy or for prophylactic colorectal surgeries where we do colectomies. I would like to take any questions here.
Yeah, better. Lot of questions. So, Dr. Mahesh.
Girish, my question is, what is the prevalence of hereditary ovarian cancer in India and the detection rate?
It should be less than 5%, sir. It's quite a rare thing to happen as a hereditary if you're talking about this BRCA1. That's the commonest one in hereditary, and it is about less than 5%.
One more question I have is prophylactic surgery, how well it is taken by the Indian patients, and do you have any personal experience to quote?
Personal experience with respect to ovary, sir. Breast I have got, ovary I have not met.
Yeah, any experience, yeah.
Whenever we have patient with breast, at the same time we need to talk about ovary who has not presented with ovarian malignancies as such. So in such scenario, after completion of ovary, they actually take up very well. They are patients who will for surgical intervention. Very few of them probably have opted for surveillance. Usually most of them opted for surgeries.
Okay, thank you.
What I meant was that presentation was not by ovary as such with these mutations. The presentation was breast, and then they were advised about risk reduction surgeries for ovary, so that it takes care of the breast and the ovary malignancies also as such.
Dr. Nuli, sir. Dr. Nuli.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Girish, my question is this about the family you were talking. No, apart from family history, anything else we should check to go ahead with the RRM?
With respect to breast, you're talking, sir.
Yes.
When you have a breast patient, when you consider it as a significant family history, then you have 2 or more family members, first degree relatives having malignancies, and the age of presentation is less, and then you do this BRCA testing, then probably you will have to look for nothing else, sir. When you have this test being positive, probably that should suffice, and with a significant family, you can go ahead with the surgeries.
And what is your this one, sir, opinion on this quadrivalent vaccine?
You're talking about cervix, sir?
Yeah, CA cervix, sir.
I'll come to that, sir. I'll come to that.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Right. Dr. Madan.
Sir, yes, sir. Sir, I have a doubt on prophylactic mastectomy, sir. For example, if a 55 years old lady found out to be BRCA positive, and the patient has 2 daughters, and she's the elder sister of her family, whom should we advise the prophylactic mastectomy in the first place, sir?
First, you should confirm whether it is a germline mutation or not. The presentation lady, 55 years, usually is unlikely presentation of a BRCA malignancy.
Okay, sir.
So very unlikely that it is a germline mutation. You should check whether it is a germline mutation or not. If it is germline mutation, then you will advise the daughters to undergo that test. And if they are positive, then probably, as I mentioned earlier, after completion of the family, you can consider them for surveillance or for surgery.
Okay, sir. And the sisters also should be advised to go through, since she's the elder sister.
Both elder, younger, both have to be. You don't know who has inherited this.
Okay, sir. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions?
Sir, I have a question,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Sir, in FAP, when to advise prophylactic surgery, sir? At what age?
At the time of detection, sir. If you are detected, you please consider the first surgery. And you have known mutation there, you have checked up, even without mutation, familial adenomatous has thousands of polyps, more than 100 is the diagnostic one. When you have known that, you have proven this thing, you can consider surgery at the earliest. You need not wait.
Dr. Girish,
Sir,
who will do the genetic counseling for all these patients?
at least in our country, you will have very few people who are trained in genetic counseling.
Right.
There are specific training programs for these genetic counseling. At least in our setup, probably we'll have to study this, and we should be in a condition to talk to the patients as their first informants.
Right.
Sir, in Pune, hello?
Yes, sir.
Sir, in Pune, in Dinanath Mangeshkar Hospital, we have an excellent genetic counseling center, sir.
All major oncologic centers have that, sir. Apart from all major oncology centers, there are multiple other private hospitals, even in Bangalore also they have. But the frequency of which the patient can meet them probably would be less. So when you are as a primary care provider, you should be in a condition to explain and talk to them. And definitely you should take their help whenever it is warranted.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And the genetic testing you do in all the breast cases or only on suspicion?
No, sir. It is only for all patients in ovaries, not on all breast cancer. When you have a significant family history, then only you consider for BRCA along with the younger age of presentation before 30 years, around less than 40 years, then you consider for BRCA along with significant family history. Otherwise, it is not a blanket statement for breast ones. It is a blanket statement for BRCA2 in case of ovary only.
Ovary, okay. See, bariatric surgery is a risk reduction surgery according to you?
No, sir, I would not take it as a risk reduction surgery for malignancy.
Right. Any other questions? Okay, continue, Girish.
There are many other modalities as the risk reducing things. It could be chemo prevention using some drugs or dietary components which lead to diet modulation, micronutrients including retinoids, carotenoids, antioxidants, all those things are mentioned, folic acids, B vitamins. All these things are debated, and the final evidence is such that presently there is no evidence to use them as the ones against malignancy. For example, retinoids were used for oropharyngeal and oral cavity malignancies earlier. Probably they have no role. With respect to all others which are mentioned here, there is presently no evidence to prove themselves as that they can be used as dietary supplements to reduce malignancies. There are some selective estrogen receptor modulators which I have already mentioned, including tamoxifen and raloxifene. They act as both agonists and antagonists on these estrogen receptors. They act as antagonists in estrogen beta receptors which are present in the breast. At the same time, they may act as agonists on estrogen alpha receptors which are present in the uterus. So it's a double-edged sword, though the risk of malignancy or this agonistic effect onto the uterine endometrium layer is less, which can be easily kept in tab by using a transvaginal ultrasound or a MRI for the matter. But commonly a transvaginal ultrasound or a simple up-down sonography will tell the involvement of endometrium, increase in the thickness of endometrium. These can be continued to be safely used as post-translation pathway methods for chemo prevention. Coming to vaccines, there are specific vaccines associated when available for hepatitis B virus and human papillomavirus. Hepatitis B virus is a DNA virus which has been probably, the vaccine has been used probably since the 90s, the early 90s it has been started, and it has significantly reduced the infection rate and appropriately the reduction in the hepatocellular carcinoma also. More importantly, these vaccines have been shown to be helpful in case of human papillomavirus. As I mentioned earlier, the strains associated with anogenital malignancies are 16 and 18 commonly. Apart from 16 and 18, there are 31 and 33 strains are also associated. 3 more less common variants are also available. So around 5 to 7 variants cause this anogenital malignancies, including cervix, penis, and perianal region. So 2 vaccines are presently available, another 3. One is called Cervarix and the other is called Gardasil. This Cervarix includes strains of 16 and 18, Gardasil includes 16, 18, and 6 and 11. This 6 and 11 is known to cause warts in the perianal region. They are directly not associated with malignancy as such. There is something called Gardasil 9, which also includes, apart from these 4, 31 and 33 strains. HPV virus actually encode for few early proteins called E proteins. There are about 6 of them, E1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And some late proteins called L proteins, 1 and 2. They are called capsid proteins. Of these early proteins, E5 is known to have a tumor suppressor effect. It directly is known to affect the functioning of P53 gene. So that leads to one of the important factors for causing malignancies. They are known to happen in less industrialized nations like ours and many other Southeast Asian countries. These infections happen usually in less hygienic conditions. It could be either poor sexual hygiene or pure just body hygiene can lead to infections. These vaccines, when given, actually prevent the formation of cervical intraepithelial neoplasia only. They directly don't cause or don't prevent the effect, prevent the formation of malignancy. They just prevent cervical intraepithelial neoplasia only. So when a person who is having no infection and gets this vaccine, the chances of developing this cervical intraepithelial neoplasia is less, and further the progression of intraepithelial neoplasia into malignancy is avoided. So that prevents malignancy. It doesn't have a direct effect on malignancy. For a person who has already got an infection over there and some changes which have happened over there, the usage of vaccine on them has got no role. It also means that patients who have already exposed to sexual intercourse may not be benefit from this usage of these vaccines. So the ideal age group would be the ones who have been sexually naive at around in their teenage can be considered for this vaccination to prevent cervical intraepithelial neoplasia only. This has shown to be one of the recent benefits of vaccination in preventing malignancies. I would like to take any questions over here.
So Girish,
Sir.
can it be given in the childhood also, this vaccine then?
Usually at the teenage group, around 12 to 16 is the age group which is usually targeted, so before they become sexually active, and usually before 12 it is not given.
Right. Any other questions? Chat box. Dr. Lakshman?
Nothing at all. No problem. Yeah.
Dr. Mahesh, you had some question? Nothing. Okay.
Nothing, sir. Nothing, sir.
Postgraduates, all are very silent. Okay, what about pregnancy after this chemotherapy or risk reduction surgery, Girish?
You mean risk reduction surgery of what, sir? You mean you're talking about removal of ovaries?
Ovaries or breast?
Breast, removal of breast should not have any problem, sir. They are appropriate, what do you say, for milk. Other products can be used for milk. Apart from that, risk reduction surgery for breast should not be a problem. When you are dealing with wherein you have to remove the ovaries, then you have to clearly talk to them that you need to complete the family. If they are so uncomfortable in getting the family being completed, you may talk to them regarding oocyte preservation after removal of the ovaries and the fallopian tube. You may consider them for, or you may talk to them regarding in vitro fertilization and other assisted reproductive methods.
Right. Okay. Any other questions? Right. Continue, Girish.
Coming to the last part, the cancer screening part, whenever the cancer disease burden is significant, or whenever the patient, whenever there is a, in the disease, there is a clear detectable preclinical phase, and the test which is being applied can detect the cancer in earlier stage, then probably the screening has some benefit in usage of in cancers. And whenever the disease is detected and the treatment is initiated, there should be an improved outcome. It is, should not be just a lead time gain. Lead time bias should not happen, or it is not just the benefit of lead time bias. There should be a benefit of non-disease lifetime benefit. The death should be happening after the lead time bias is taken care of, and there should be something, a gain in the number of lifetime in the age with respect to number of years lived. Commonly we use for breast, mammography is used. It's a simple X-ray mammography. The recommendations are that the screening should be started at the age of 45 years, and they continue to be screened till about 55 years. You may continue to screen forever if the patient has a life expectancy for about 10 years and they wish to continue. But usually it is considered as biennial, in the sense once in 2 years after 55 years. Okay. If the patient wishes to continue, they may continue as annually. It is a simple about exposure of radiation would be around 0.25 centigrades in each mammography being done. As such, it doesn't by itself has any carcinogenic effect till now proven. when you have a patient who has got genetic mutation, that is BRCA1 and other lesser known genetic mutations, then you may consider them for MRI at an early age along with mammography. It is just should not be a MRI or just not mammography. It should be a combination of MRI and mammography. The other lesser known symptoms which are mentioned over there, and also the patients who have got radiation for Hodgkin disease, which I mentioned earlier, and you have a risk model which assesses that the risk is about 20 to 25% of development of breast malignancy, then you consider this annual mammography along with MRI, not just an individual investigation mode starting at the age of 30 years. Coming to colon cancer screening, multiple modalities are used for colon cancer screening, and they are usually, or not usually, they are started at the age of 45 years. They are not considered before 45 years of age. So various tests like occult blood test, immunofluorescent tests on the feces are used, wherein they usually look for heme proteins. DNA testing is also done, stool DNA testing, looking for again blood components out there. Flexible sigmoid component sigmoidoscopy can be done every 5 years, colonoscopy every 10 years, double contrast barium enema every 5 years, and CT colonography every 5 years. We should know that it is just not that you will use one modality and stop over there. There is no proven benefit of using just one modality. Imagine that you do a colonoscopy once in every 10 years and you tell the patient that you will be seeing only after 10 years. No, it should not be done. Probably we need to involve other tests like FOBT or a sigmoidoscopy when required in between these two colonoscopy examinations. So all these screening tests are advised for colon malignancies at and after 45 years of age. Cervical cancer is one of the commonest malignancies, at least in our country. It was discovered or it gained importance after Papanicolaou discovered the staining of these cytology specimens derived both from the ectocervix and the endocervical canal. So cytology is the commonest method of screening, wherein we take the specimen from the ectocervix and stain them and look for changes in the cells. There might be some endocervical canal cells which also has to be seen during the specimen, during the testing, during the examination. If it is not seen, probably it is an inadequate specimen. You need to repeat it. Presently, we are also combining the HPV infections along with HPV DNA is to be sought in these specimens along with the cytology. That adds up to the benefit in screening the detection of HPV. So sir mentioned something earlier about this thing. This has a role in screening only, not in a proven patient of malignancy. So never will do any pap smear before 21 of years age, and it has to be started at 21 of years of age, regardless of exposure to sex or not, sexual intercourse. And every 3 years it has to be done between the age group of 21 to 29, and never it will be accompanied with this age group, will never be tested for HPV. And between 30 to 60 years, it is about every 5 years, both cytology and the HPV DNA testing has to be done. This is called as co-testing. And if you opt for cytology alone, then it will be a frequency of around 3 years. So between 30 to 65 years of age, if it is co-testing, once in 5 years we do, and if it is cytology alone, we do it every 3 years. And after 65 years of age, we usually discontinue. And the patients who have undergone hysterectomy or non-cancerous condition need not be tested. And there is still requirement of patients who have undergone or received HPV vaccines have to be continued for this screening. Lung cancer, one of the leading cause of death all over the world. Earlier, there was no proper detective modality. Now there is something called as low dose CT scan, which involves exposure of about 1.5 millisieverts of radiation, and it happens in less than 50 seconds. Though the availability of such scanning setups are less in our country, but still it is known to be benefited or shown significant benefit in other developed nations where this low dose CT scan has prevented the number of malignancy, the number of deaths associated with lung. So the age group which is usually screened are between 55 to 74 and who have got a significant smoking history and who have got good health, that the intervention definitely will help in, the screening will help in the planning of further surgical intervention or non-surgical intervention, so that there is a number of years of benefit in life. The other most important malignancy wherein screening is important is in India, at least, is for this oral cavity. There was a seminal paper published by Shankar Raman and Shankar Raman from Kerala, which has shown benefit clearly that a simple examination by a physician or a trained non-medical person with the proper light can detect malignancies in the oral cavities just by simple examination, or the patient themselves can examine themselves by using a simple torchlight in the mirror, and this has shown to prevent deaths or the risk reduction associated with the morbidity associated with malignancies are all known to improve. So this has to be probably, as a treating physician, we need to educate the people regarding oral cavity screening. I come to my last slide. Thanks a lot. I would like to take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Girish. I think there are a lot of questions. Dr. Lakshman first. Better your comment.
Yeah, two comments, one on breast and one on the colon.
Yes, sir.
Can you touch on the false positive or the lack of sensitivity, sorry, lack of specificity of MRI of the breast, and the recent controversy about screening as a program for breast, because there is the data that it actually improves early detections and saves lives has been questioned, and of late Scandinavian countries, for example, have stopped the screening program.
Yes. To come to your first question, sir, MRI has known to pick up very small lesions which might have definitely would have not progressed to significant malignancies. This has shown to be unnecessary intervention, though I would not know the exact percentage of what percentage of them would have undergone this unnecessary surgical intervention, wherein they would have just lived with that smaller minute malignancies which would have never
this unnecessary intervention is estimated to be 30 to 40%
with MRI.
With MRI, yeah.
And the other thing which you mentioned is screening as in general population. There is something called a Swiss study which clearly has shown that lakhs of people who have undergone this screening have shown no obvious benefit with the other general population who have never undergone any screening as such. Yeah. So as you mentioned, many countries have opted out of this screening program of breast, and probably with respect to our country, probably the education is such that the general population education is such that we are not subjecting them, though in some cities which might be considered. Otherwise, we have not seen that scenario, but there is clear evidence against general screening of breast malignancies with mammography.
Regarding the colon, 25 years ago, the trend was that a large majority of colonic cancers were within the reach of a flexible sigmoidoscope. Okay. But there's a trend now where the neoplasm is now, which meant earlier that left colon cancers were a lot more common than right colon cancers. But there's a trend now which has shown that there is a near equal distribution between the right and left colons. And so if you are having a screening endoscopic program, it is preferable to have a colonoscopic screening rather than sigmoidoscopic screening. Yeah.
Accepted.
Any other questions? Right. Anybody else? Postgraduates? Ajit, Pawan, Madan?
No, sir.
Yes, Ajit, you have any doubts?
No, sir.
All cleared. Dr. Noli, sir?
Dr. Girish, sir.
Sir, you can call me Girish only, sir. No need to call me, sir. Tell me, sir.
Okay. This self-breast examination, what is your opinion on that?
mean with respect to screening method,
Breast,
sir?
sir. Yeah, screening.
So there is no role for any self-breast examination as a screening method, sir. It is
Okay.
clearly proven against.
And this this vaccine against CA cervix in young girls we were talking.
Yeah.
Why it has not become so popular in our country? Because of its cost or multi-dose? What is the thing, sir? What is your opinion?
The cost, as far as I know, it is not too much costly, sir. With I don't know the exact cost, but it is not so much
It
costly.
is around
2000,
2,000
I
to
think.
3,000,
Yeah,
sir.
it is around 2,000 rupees.
Hmm.
Why it has not been, probably we have not propaganda this, or the general public awareness is such that we would not be exposed to what do you say, sexual activity at an early age, probably that one.
And this routine examination of screening tests, sir, what we used to do is before this COVID breakdown, we used to go in the villages and screen women above 45 years who have got white discharge and other bleeding problems. So we used to screen 100 women above 45 years who have got such complaints for this staining and HPV detection. With pathologists we used to go. Around 2 to 3 people we could detect the early CA cervix patients, sir. That is a good screening test, I believe.
Probably one more point about with respect to cervix, people don't know much about this vaccine also, I feel, sir. Why we don't know?
Yes,
I
sir,
think
it has
the
not become
propaganda is
popular,
such
sir.
that it's not shown as.
Right.
And
Sir, what is the cost of BRCA testing, sir?
around 15 to 22,000, depending upon the lab we opt to.
Okay, sir.
Right. If there are no more questions, Dr. Lakshman, your final comments as usual. Unmute. You are muted.
I had, yeah. Good overview, Girish. Thank you for covering a very wide topic comprehensively and in a very succinct manner. Nice talk. Thank you.
How much the PTs?
Very nice. Thank you very much. Thank you all.